On October 6th, the West was asleep. On October 7th, Hamas terrorists slaughtered civilians and the world woke up to the moral bankruptcy of the people who defended them. This wasn't just terrorism. It was a mirror. And for the first time, a lot of people didn't like what they saw.
The day that delusions died. When Hamas terrorists crossed over the border with Israel and murdered 1,400 innocent people, they destroyed families and entire communities. They also shattered long-held delusions here in the West. A friend of mine joked that she woke up on October 7th as a liberal and went to bed that evening as a 65-year-old conservative. But it wasn't really a joke, and she wasn't the only one. So what changed? The best way to answer that question is with the help of Thomas Sowell, one of the most brilliant public intellectuals alive today. In 1987, Sowell published A Conflict of Visions. In this now classic, he offers a simple and powerful explanation of why people disagree about politics. We disagree about politics, Sowell argues, because we disagree about human nature. We see the world through one of two competing visions, each of which tells a radically different story about human nature. Those with the unconstrained vision think that humans are malleable and can be perfected. They believe that social ills and evils can be overcome through collective action that encourages humans to behave better. To subscribers of this view, poverty, crime, inequality, and war are not inevitable. Rather, they're puzzles that can be solved. We need only say the right thing, enact the right policies, and spend enough money, and we will suffer these social ills no more. This worldview is the foundation of the progressive mindset. By contrast, those who see the world through a constrained vision lens believe that human nature is a universal constant. No amount of social engineering can change the sober reality of human self-interest, or the fact that human empathy and social resources are necessarily scarce. People who see things this way believe that most political and social problems will never be solved, they can only be managed.
This is very fascinating, the second viewpoint, because this is exactly what Judaism tells us. God created the world with wealthy people and with poor people. It's part of the vision God has of there being a symmetry going on between the two. This is not only true of wealth and poverty, but of many other polarizations that we have in the world, just like we have males and females, all by design.
This approach is the bedrock of the conservative worldview. The barbarism of Hamas and the explanations and celebrations throughout the West that followed their orgy of violence have forced an overnight exodus from the unconstrained camp into the constrained one. Many people woke up on October 7th sympathetic to parts of woke ideology and went to bed that evening questioning how they had signed on to a worldview that had nothing to say about the mass rape and murder of innocent people by terrorists. The reaction to the attacks, from outwardly pro-Hamas protests to the mealy-mouthed statements of college presidents, celebrities, and CEOs, has exploded the comforting stories many on the center-left have told themselves about progressive identity politics. For many years, they opted for the coping mechanism of pretending that the institutional capture of universities, corporations, and media organizations by the woke mind virus was no big deal. Sure, students shutting down events they disagree with is annoying, they would say, but it's just students doing what students do. October 8th was a wake-up call for those who didn't appreciate that the ideology of the campus has spread to our cities, supercharged by social media. We woke up on October 8th to the clamor of street protests in cities across the West condemning Israel even before any major Israeli response to the attacks. We watched celebratory crowds brandish swastikas and chant "Gas the Jews" at events purporting to be about the loss of Palestinian lives. We saw Black Lives Matter chapters lionize terrorists. In London, where I live, we watched the mayor deliver glib assurances that London's diversity is our greatest strength, in the midst of a wave of anti-Semitic attacks and as Jewish schools were forced to close because of safety concerns. Across the West, we noticed that our representatives refused to condemn Hamas's kidnappings, and that the legacy media was all too eager to swallow and regurgitate Hamas propaganda. Prior to the October 7th massacre, many students, alumni, and donors with the unconstrained vision trusted that the university, for all its many problems, remained the West's best environment for civil discourse. But then they watched university presidents who were quick to issue statements condemning the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the killing of George Floyd fall silent, or for the most slippery, equivocal statements, carefully crafted to avoid offending anti-Israel groups.
See, over here he's bringing up a second point. In the first point, he's just establishing what the Torah and Judaism really emphasizes very strongly, that negativity is a real thing. This is true in the micro and in the macro. So even personally as individuals, I have tendencies which are negative. And I have to rein those in. There are different ways of responding to those negative tendencies, but they are embedded within me, designed by God. I have what we call an animal soul, just like you do. And we have to deal with that. We can't just say, well, it is there because something happened to me. No, nothing happened. I was created that way with that. And the fundamental reason is because through responding to it and taking on these negative tendencies, we bring out a much deeper power of good within ourselves. But regardless of that benefit, whatever the benefit may be, it's there and it's part of who we are, even if nothing happened to us. It's our nature. So we have to acknowledge that. That's point number one he made. Now point number two he's making is the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy where people are supposedly aligned with Saul's explanation of people who just, say, the ills of society will go away. We just have to, remanage things, right? But then suddenly when it comes to Ukraine and other world events, suddenly we don't see people saying that. They are suddenly defending Ukraine, right? And what's cropping up is this is all about anti-Semitism.
They watched an Israeli at Columbia get beaten with a stick and heard reports about the physical intimidation of students on campuses across the country. They read about dozens of student organizations at Harvard signing a letter holding Israel, quote, entirely responsible for the massacre of Israelis. The events of the last 2 weeks have shattered the illusion that wokeness is about protecting victims and standing up for persecuted minorities. This ideology is and has always been about the one thing many of us have told you it is about for years: power. And after the last 2 weeks, there can be no doubt about how these people will use any power they seize. They will seek to destroy in any way they can those who disagree. This unpleasant conclusion is surprising only if you're still clinging to the unconstrained vision. But if there is any constant in human history, it is that revolutionaries always feel entitled to destroy those who stand in their way. Just as hope about the possibility of peace with jihadis seems suicidally naive, reconciliation with citizens seized by the woke mindset seems a long way off.
Well, he brings out this powerful point that this is all about power and that people who create revolutions feel like they are justified in killing anyone who is in their way. That's exactly how Hamas has been justified by all of these people throughout the world. Here they are, murdering brutally innocent civilians. And the world gets up literally the next day before Israel has done anything and applauds them as freedom fighters, justifying that they can do whatever they need to do for this new revolution.
The shift from the unconstrained to constrained vision starker than on immigration. For decades, both Europe and America basked in an unconstrained vision of immigration. In the US, the melting pot that could integrate the 19th century Germans, Irish Catholics, or Japanese could surely absorb those crossing the southern border. And many of these new arrivals would do jobs Americans didn't want to do. Europe needed immigration to deal with an aging population, with many European countries inviting people from their former colonies to fill labor shortages and skills gaps. But over time, especially from the late 90s onwards, the unconstrained vision ran rampant through media and political elites, and immigration went from being a solution to specific problems to a moral good in its own right. I am myself an immigrant. When I moved to Britain from Russia in 1996, net immigration into Britain ran at 55,000 people a year. Last year, in 2022, net immigration stood at over 600,000 people. Over the past decade, more and more people in America and Europe have quietly shifted towards the constrained view of immigration. The Brexit referendum and the election of Donald Trump were early warning signs of this ongoing transformation. Today we see New York, where nearly 60,000 newly arrived migrants are putting tremendous strain on shelters and city services like healthcare, education, and public transport. The city has already spent over $1 billion to address this crisis, and projections indicate that housing costs alone could exceed $4.3 billion by next summer. Lifelong Democrats in Manhattan tell the New York Times that we have too many people coming in and that Biden could do something more about putting our borders up a little stronger, I mean, we're not here to take in the whole world. We can only do so much, they say. Europeans have learned similar lessons from their own migrant crisis. In Britain, we spend approximately $10 million a day on hotels for people who've come here illegally. We refuse to deport foreign criminals over human rights concerns. You may recall seeing recent media reports about the small Italian island of Lampedusa, whose population quadrupled in a day as large numbers of illegal migrants arrived. We have now learned that a man who recently shot 2 Swedish soccer fans dead in a terror attack in Brussels arrived there illegally via the island in 2011. The man was known to the authorities as a security risk due to his jihadi links, but when his asylum application was rejected in 2020, he was not deported. How many such people are allowed to come and stay in Europe is impossible to say, as hundreds of thousands of people make illegal crossings into Europe every year. But despite these shocking statistics, the issue of illegal immigration has been impossible to discuss in polite company for decades. No matter how bad the problem became, to raise concerns about it would almost always lead to accusations of bigotry and xenophobia. What we've witnessed over the last 2 weeks, with enormous pro-Hamas rallies in cities like London, Paris, and Washington, D.C., has the potential to change the immigration debate in a decisive way. It is much harder to pretend that allowing people to enter our countries illegally is a moral good when you watch some of them celebrate mass murder in the streets of your capital cities. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has recently announced the intention to deport illegal immigrants on a large scale, as his coalition hemorrhages votes to anti-immigration parties. France has banned pro-Palestine protests and warned that foreign nationals who take part will be removed from the country. Britain has also threatened to revoke the visas of foreigners who praise Hamas. Whether this represents a permanent realignment towards a more constrained view of immigration, or merely a temporary blip on the path to progressive dystopia, remains to be seen. To express concern about border security has for many years been coded as right-wing. But how many people, after the horrors of October 7th, believe that a secure border is anything other than the most basic test of national security?
So, he's making a very important point here, but this talk he gave in October of 2 weeks after October 7th. We're now 18 months later, and 18 months later, not everything played out exactly as he says he was hoping it would, but you can clearly see that the awareness of the importance of immigration has risen. Firstly, look what happened in Israel, right? When you don't have safe borders, what happens? But what's happening in many countries as well, when immigrants come in and we don't know who is coming in, what they end up doing in the country. The thing is this: there, of course, people say, my father is an immigrant, and how many Jews were saved by coming over in World War II? Before World War II, during World War II, my one side of my family's grandparents came in the 1920s. The rest of their family was killed in Poland. But here's the thing. There always needs to be structure to anything that's done. Otherwise, things collapse. So yes, immigration is a beautiful thing and needs to be done, but it needs to be done with a structure. It can't just be wide open borders, because that always leads to destruction. It's sort of like what we call love and respect in a relationship. Love is a beautiful thing, but if there's no respect, the love will destroy the relationship. It will not survive. You must have boundaries, borders, limits, respect. All of that are different ways of saying the exact same thing. And that's really the point he's making here.
I've just returned from a week in Los Angeles where, on recognizing my name, every single Armenian Lyft driver stuck up a conversation in Russian. Once the inevitable complaints about the rising cost of living were out of the way, several shared with me their own journeys into the US and those of their families. I was struck by the fact that those who came in the 90s and noughties had usually come legally, but more recent arrivals had made their way through Mexico. One man told me about smuggling his 2 brothers and 80-year-old father through the southern border. It's easy, he told me. I have no doubt he's correct. 2023 saw the highest number of illegal crossings since records began. And polling shows that the American people, who are otherwise uniquely welcoming of new arrivals, are unhappy about it. The problem with illegal immigration isn't just its scale. It's that we have no idea whether the people coming are an 80-year-old Armenian retiree or a jihadi terrorist plotting another 9/11. It is clearer now than ever before that borders aren't about bigotry. They're about security. In the sign of the times, Joe Biden is now continuing work on the border wall the Democrats spent years criticizing Donald Trump for erecting. The reason the readjustment is necessary, and in my view highly likely, is that proponents of the unconstrained vision have been allowed to ride roughshod over the concerns of ordinary citizens. They have used this window of opportunity to implement extraordinarily impractical and outright harmful ideas because they take the unbelievable levels of safety, plenty, and freedom we enjoy in the West for granted. The one form of privilege you will never hear them address is the first world privilege that we all benefit from every single day. They've done this because the fundamental flaw in the unconstrained model of the world is a failure to understand Thomas Sowell's greatest maxim. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. When you let your institutions be captured by an ideology of intolerance and illiberalism masquerading as progress, that has consequences. When you sow division at home and signal weakness abroad, that has consequences. When you debase the public's faith in what they are told by the media and their government, that has consequences too. Western civilization has produced some of the most stunning scientific, technological, social, and cultural breakthroughs in human history. If you consider yourself liberal or even progressive, it must surely be clear by now that America and her allies are the only places in the world where your values are even considered values. If our civilization is allowed to collapse, it will not be replaced by a progressive utopia. It will be replaced by chaos and barbarism. Will this waking up moment persist? It depends in large part on our courage to look reality in the face. As Sowell explained, when you want to help people, you tell them the truth. When you want to help yourself, you tell them what they want to hear.
Wow, that's so much of what's going on. We're so scared to say the truth. We just want to keep things in the convenient way that they are moving. And, did this wake-up call continue from when he shared the speech in October of 2023? I think a lot of people in the silent majority have really awoken from this and realized a lot of the truths that he's saying here, and that's the shift. We still hear a lot of noise on the street, but I don't believe that is the majority, and I think a lot more people woke up than we hear vocally being expressed.
And the truth is, we have indulged in magical thinking for too long, choosing comforting myths over harsh realities about terrorism, about immigration, and about a whole host of other issues. In our hunger for progress, we have forgotten that not all change is progress. Now, the world is paying the price for that self-indulgence. Let's hope that recent events are the wake-up call we so desperately need.
It's beautiful, very well spoken, and really, this is the reason why religions are inherently conservative thinking, because when you have instructions from God about how one should conduct their life, then you are actually bringing discipline into your life. And that's one of the fundamental points over here. And that's restriction, limitation, controlled borders, that's discipline. We have immigration, but we have it with structure. We have it with guidelines. It's a disciplined immigration. That can breed the most beautiful kindness in the world. But if it's undisciplined, it leads to chaos.